Mini PCs are awesome. You have these tiny little boxes that can pretty much fit anywhere. It can give you a lot of the same functionality and sometimes even performance as a full-size desktop. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Kamrui AM02 Pro Mini PC from AceMagician, and we're going to see what it can do as far as emulation and gaming. So first up, let's unbox it and see what we get. The box is, I guess you would call it functional. It just says Kamrui on the front and Mini PC, and that's pretty much it. The sides, again, some very simple text, and on the back we can see we have a little sticker here that tells us what color we have, how much RAM, and how much storage we get. That's pretty much it. The box is a little bit cheap, but I guess that's not really that important. Getting to the inside and the part we actually care about, when you first open up the box, you're going to see the Mini PC, and it comes in this plastic wrapping that should offer some type of protection against scratching. And you can see the size of it is pretty small. It fully fits in my hand, and if we compare the size of it to something like an 8-bit Dock controller, you can see just how compact it is. You also get this tiny little manual that shows you how to connect it to a monitor or how to mount it, and it comes in several different languages. Not sure how helpful it is, but I guess a manual is better than no manual. And that's about it for the top of the box, other than this little foam pad that just adds a little bit of extra protection. So moving on, for the rest of the box, we have an HDMI cable, a pretty hefty power cord with a North American connection, power supply, and a base mount and some screws in case you wanted to mount it. So that's pretty much for the unboxing experience. There's not a whole lot going on here. There's very little fluff. It's just all stuff. So if you're wondering what comes in the box, there you go. So one of the best things about this little thing is that it's not really going to take up in your room. It's going to be really easy to put behind a monitor or next to a TV, and it's not really going to be noticeable, or you can just mount it and just have it completely out of the way. Personally, I think what I'm going to do is just use a keyboard like this that has a built-in mouse and connects over a 2.4 GHz dongle, and just have this in my living room, set it next to my TV, and this way I still have full control over Windows and can pretty much do whatever I want with it, but it's not going to use up a whole lot of room. So with that, I think it's time we move on and let's take a look at some tech specs. It is currently listed on Amazon for $325, but that's before discounts and any coupons we might have available for you, so be sure to check out our description because you should be able to find this for under $300. Has a Ryzen 7 5700U processor that has 8 cores, 16 threads, a base speed of 1.8 and a boost all the way up to 16 GB of DDR4 dual channel SODIMM RAM, which is expandable all the way up to 64, 512 GB of internal storage via M.2 2280 SSD, which is upgradable all the way up to 2 TB, Gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi 6, and Bluetooth 5.2. So while it's not going to blow you out of the water with the specs, it's definitely no slouch. And while we're going to be focusing on the emulation and gaming side of things, if you're looking for something that can handle everyday tasks, maybe some light video and photo editing and streaming in 4K, this is definitely one you should consider, especially if you get it at a good price. And now let's take a look at the PC itself. So in the front, we have a headphone jack, power button, and a USB-C port. On the sides, we just have an intake vent. On the bottom, we have some other vents, as well as these 4 little legs here with the 4 screws that hold the bottom on. We also have the 2 mounting screws, and we have a little label here just like the one we saw on the box itself. On the other side, we have our other vent, and if we move on to the back, we can see all of our I/O. Starting with our charging port, we have a display port, HDMI port, 3 USB 3.0 ports, 1 2.0, and our Ethernet port, which is going to come in very handy if you decide to use this as a streaming box. So that's going to be it for what's outside. How about we open it up and take a look at what's inside? Luckily, it looks like the only tool we're going to need is a Phillips head screwdriver, so we're just going to flip it over and start by taking out the 4 bottom legs. Now once that back cover is off, you're going to have direct access to the RAM and the SSD, and as you can see, this is just your standard laptop RAM, which is upgradable all the way up to 64 GB, and it is nice to see that it is pretty easy to do. You can also see that there's a heatsink over the M.2 drive, another nice addition, especially with such a small device. Now we're going to try to go a little bit deeper, and for that we need to take off another 8 screws. I was actually wrong about the screw count. It's a total of 9 screws. Not a huge deal, just want to make sure I clear that up. And now with those screws off, we should be able to get right into the rest of the PC. Now be careful if you do try to do this, because there is going to be a ribbon cable in here, and if you're not careful with that, you might rip it off on accident. I almost did it, and that would have not been a good time, so definitely be careful. There really isn't much of a reason to ever go this far into the teardown, especially if you're just an average user, but we just want to see what else is in here. The first thing we can see is the Wi-Fi card. It is replaceable, so if for whatever reason you had to change it out in the future, you definitely can. We have a fan, and that's really about it. The rest of it is soldered on here, so you can't really do much about it. So that being said, I think it's time we put this back together, and let's move on with the video. So for the benchmarking, I decided to run user benchmark, so it will test the GPU, CPU, RAM, and memory on it, and just kind of compare it to others in the market within the same category. I won't normally do a lot of benchmarking because there are other people on YouTube doing a much better job of that than what I would really want to do or potentially could do. They understand this a little bit more than what I do. Normally, I'll go ahead and just do game testing, but I know for some people it's important and they want to see those numbers. So I just went ahead and ran those tests, and at the end of this segment, you can go ahead and see those results. So up next, I'm going to do a quick fan test so you can get an idea of how loud the fan actually gets. And after that, we're just going to go right into the games. It's really hard to show on video how loud a fan can get because a lot of things can affect how loud it's going to sound on your headphones or your speakers. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put the camera as close to the PC as possible, and I'm going to be making some noise around it with some dome switches, the buttons on the controller, and I'm going to be pressing a mouse to do some clicks. Hopefully that gives you a good comparison point to see how loud this is going to get. But I can tell you from actual using it in person, even under heavy loads, it's really not loud. But let's go ahead and take a listen. Hopefully that section was helpful and it gave you a good idea of how loud the PC actually is. But now I'd say it's time to get into some games. So because we have such a powerful chip, I decided to go ahead and skip all of the lower end stuff. All of that's going to run no problem. You're going to be able to upscale it. You're going to have a great time with those systems. We're going to start things off with Gamecube and Wii. And just like those other systems, you can upscale this to 1080p and it's going to run without any issues. You're not really going to have to worry about adjusting settings. None of that. Simply install the emulator, get the game, start playing. For Wii, things can get a little bit tricky, but that's only because of the controller, not really because the system can't handle it. You're going to have to get creative with some of those games that use the Wiimote and nunchucks and find ways to map that to an Xbox 360 controller or Xbox One. Man, I feel really old when I say Xbox 360 controller. But anyway, you're going to have to find creative ways to fix that. As far as the actual power, you have more than enough to play those games. Now what I'm going to do is actually let a couple games here run so you can get an idea of the audio and see how smooth everything is working.
¡Detrás de ti, imbécil!
Just like with Gamecube and Wii, PlayStation 2 can be upscaled to 1080p, and you really shouldn't have any issues running these games. You might find a game here and there that's going to have some trouble, but that's mostly to do with emulation and not a lack of power. For the most part though, this is going to be a solid PlayStation 2 machine, so if you just wanted to grab this and set it up in your living room and just relive a lot of those games, this is going to be a really good way of doing that. Because even at 1080p, you still have some overhead to be able to fast forward, so a lot of those RPGs are just going to play that much better.
You don't want to make me your enemy.
circle button to equip it, and the circle button again to fire. You can also use it in first person by holding down the L1 button.
So GameCube, Wii, and PlayStation 2 worked with no issues, had a good time with them, but when we get into the next generation with Xbox 360, we start to have some problems. Unfortunately, Forza just crashed on me, and Gears of War had terrible visual glitches and audio problems at first, and it got a little bit better than where I played it, but unfortunately, Xbox 360 is a system I would say really isn't playable, at least not right now. Maybe in the future as the emulator gets a little bit better, the situation will change, but for now, I'd say skip it.
Today. So, if you're on the roads just now, then stay out of his way, kids. He does not play well with others. This is Horizon. Keep it here.
Take cover!
PlayStation 2 does do a little bit better than 360, but it's still, there's a lot of issues. The frame rate is all over the place in some games. Other games, you pretty much have to lock them to 30, and then that introduces some audio issues. So I'm sure you can find a lot of RPGs that are going to play just fine and some easier to emulate games. But still, this isn't a PC that I would recommend for Xbox 360 and PS3 emulation unless you're comfortable messing around with settings a lot and kind of tweaking things to try to get the most out of a system. If you do that, you might be able to get some games to be more playable, but still, I don't think that's something I would recommend this specific PC for.
Tried to get a little bit too fancy there on that option play.
Wii U did much better. I was able to play Breath of the Wild at 30 frames per second and use mods while I was doing it. I did have to run the game on 900p, but that's the resolution the Switch plays it at, so it really wasn't that big of a deal, especially because the art style kind of lent itself to that lower resolution. Just like with Wii U, Switch emulation does a lot better than Xbox 360 and PS3. I was able to play Red Dead Redemption at about 30 frames per second, but only once I dropped it into handheld mode. So while I was trying to do it in docked mode, the frame rate just kept dropping to the high teens, mid 20s. So that wasn't a very good experience. But once you put it in handheld mode and crank that FSR up, it's a much better experience. Now, Red Dead Redemption is going to be one of those tougher to emulate Switch games, so a lot of the other categories should be good to go. Even at dock resolutions, you are going to have to kind of play around with it, and keep in mind that Yuzu is still under development. But the performance of Switch actually makes me very hopeful for the future of PS3 and Xbox 360 emulation.
All right, Mercy, you want to visit? That's right. Ain't taking nobody up to the fort in a long time. Strange place for a decent fella to want to visit, if you don't mind me saying.
Who said I was a decent fella?
It's been abandoned for years now. Folks say it was built during the Mexican War. What kinds of soldiers around back then?
Why'd they leave?
Well, I ain't entirely sure. I heard they had to go up north to fight Indians, or maybe they got tired of being soldiers and went looking for gold.
So that's going to wrap it up for emulation, and it's going to be a pretty capable machine for that, all the way up to Wii, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. It's going to be a great experience, 1080p, put this in your living room and enjoy some retro game goodness. Now, once you get out of those systems, you're going to have a mixed bag. Wii U and Switch, you should be pretty good on that one. A lot of Switch games are going to run really, really well on this. Same thing with Wii U. Don't expect every Switch game to play. As you saw with Red Dead, you do have to adjust some settings there. And then as far as Xbox 360 and PS3, I would say treat whatever game you can get running as a bonus, because those systems just aren't going to do great here. You can adjust a lot of settings and you might be able to find that a lot of games are actually playable, but that's going to be a lot of work on your part, and it's really going to depend whether you want to make the investment for this device to try to get those games playing. Also, a lot of those games have PC ports, and as we're about to see, this thing can actually handle a good amount of them, so consider that route. Now for PC games, you're going to be able to play all of the indies on here no problem. What I wanted to see is what kind of harder to run games you can actually play on this, so I picked Doom and The Witcher 3. I know these aren't the latest AAA games, but I really don't think this is the type of system you should be buying if you're trying to play those games, unless you're looking to stream them, because that is going to be an option. So for The Witcher 3, what I did is just use the Steam Deck presets, and I was able to get it at a lock 30. And for Doom, what I did is try it at 1080, and that gave me about 30 frames per second, and then I dropped it to 720, and that hovered around 55 to 60, which, if you ask me, is pretty playable. Just have your expectations in check and understand that this isn't a high-end PC, so just the fact that you can get those games at something that you could ideally buy for under $300 is pretty impressive.
Demonic presence at unsafe location. Lockdown in effect.
So that's going to wrap it up, and the question is the Kamrui AM02 Pro Mini PC worth it? And I think for what you actually get out of it, the amount of games you can play, the productivity side of it, because it is a full-on PC, I think it's definitely worth it, especially when you consider that you can on average find this for under $300. That is a really good deal. One thing to consider though is for a similar price, you can pick up an Odin 2, which is going to be able to do a lot of the same things emulation wise that this mini PC can do, but you do have some trade-off. One is an Android, and it's more of a handheld that can dock versus the other one that's an actual PC. Now I know this isn't a comparison between the Odin 2 and a mini PC, but I did think it was worth mentioning that there are some other devices that can offer a similar experience to an extent versus what a mini PC can do. Now keep in mind there are going to be other applications for the mini PC. For example, like I was saying, I'm going to put this in my living room and I'm going to use a small keyboard to be able to use it as a media center as well and have full control from the comfort of my couch. Another thing is this mini PC can also be paired with a larger, more powerful PC that you already have at home. For example, have this in your living room and stream your Steam games with a local network into that mini PC. That way you don't have to worry about the power and you can get a pretty good experience without having to be tied down to your computer all the time. Now, of course, local streaming isn't the only thing this can do. Of course, it's a Windows PC, so Game Pass is an option. You can just install the lighter to run games, and if you do want to play those big AAA titles, you can of course stream through Game Pass. So there is a lot going on for it. But of course, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what you need and what your needs are. As far as this video, I hope the video was informative. I hope it kind of helped answer some questions. And if you weren't aware of any PCs and maybe you weren't even in the market for it, but you just decided to watch this video because, you don't know, you like us and we make good stuff, well, I appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. If you liked the video, please don't forget to like. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps the channel grow a lot. Appreciate your time and have an awesome day.